It's time for the Granada Forum radio show. Right now, live on air with your host, Granada, Wendy.
Hey, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Granada Forum radio program. We definitely got another barn burner tonight. Today is the 27th of July. I do believe it's going to be a blood red moon tonight, so it's going to be interesting to say the least. There are parts of California on fire. I know that, where my buddy lives up there sometimes I can't think, I've lost the name of it, but up there in Wild, they're on fire. But here north is going to be on fire too, unfortunately. Yeah, Idlewild, thank you. And here up north is on fire too. Lots of chemtrails in the air, unfortunately, and that's another problem that check out. www.skywatch.org, and Wingate is www. I can't think of his website in front of my head. David, the other one. I can't. Geoengineeringwatch.org. That's geoengineeringwatch.org. Check them out too. Be interested in the chemtrails. Okay, this is Revolution Radio, by the way. Besides the Blood Red Moon tonight, and we are the #1 commercial-free, listener-supported internet talk radio station in the world. We're at freedomslips.com. If you'd like to go to the homepage and leave the equivalent to a cup of coffee, we appreciate it to keep the programming on the air. And also, too, if you go to Nighthawk Special for $100, they'll give you 3,500 seeds, 3,500 seeds in how to grow, store, and plant, and everything else under the sun for that donation, so it's very well worth it. And you can check out Nighthawk's special thing, so thank you so much, Mr. Nighthawk, for that. We do have an incredible guest tonight with us, Deborah Tavares, which will be with us just a moment. Again, it's going to be a barn burner with her. I'm just going to make a couple quick announcements. Real quick, too, my special my co-host, who I can't live without, too, Mr. Nick Pearson.
Hey, hey.
And our wonderful producer, which we love very much, Mr.
Hello.
Richard Kane. Thank you, Richard. By the way, we want to put a word out to Red because she's feeling much better, and we're very glad for that one. So, Red, I'm glad you're feeling so much better. We're going to get to real quick to the announcements. Kerry Cassidy and David Adair are going to be up in Washington at the Yeoman Conference at YELM. That's YELM, projectcamelot.org. That'll be in Washington on the 28th and 29th. That's tomorrow and Sunday. Check out Kerry's website at projectcamelot.org, but check out the Yeoman Conference. That's YELM in Washington, in the state of Washington. That's also David Adair will be there too, so that'll be quite good. Also, too, the Alternative Therapies, the 46th Annual Cancer Control Convention, September 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, 2018 at the Glendale Hilton Hotel at the Cancer Control Society. We'll be there live Friday and then there Saturday and Sunday. CancerControlSociety.com. That's www.CancerControlSociety.com. That's for all the alternative therapies. And believe me, ladies and gentlemen, you definitely want to check out their website. Also, too, their phone number is 323-663-7801. That's 663-7801, and that's www.CancerControlSociety.com. One more, the Natural Health Solution Expo, which we'll be filming, I'll be there live as well, is the Natural Health Solution Expo at the LAX Marriott. And that's September 22nd through the 23rd, 2018, at the LAX Marriott at 5855 West Century Boulevard, 90045. Phone number, guys, is 562. That's 562 area code 212-3479, 562-212-3479. Let me bring on our guest, a wonderful lady named Deborah Tavares. She was on Project Camelot this week. You can check out Kerry Cassidy's projectcamelot.org. She was on Wednesday from 7 to 9, so check her out. But her website is www.stopthecrime.net. That's www.stopthecrime.net. Ms. Tavares, are you there, beautiful?
Well, thank you again so much for having me on. I have a wonderful guest on with us again out of Ireland to report the enormity of the fires that we're witnessing all over the world. But for the moment, I want to discuss what's happening here in Northern California. Now, I am in Santa Rosa. We're a few hours south of Redding, California, but we are literally experiencing smoke in our valley here in Santa Rosa, lots of smoke. This is a very sad day for us because we know that the fires in Redding, California right now are out of control. They are evacuating the entire town. So today, of course, is Friday. It is July the 27th of 2018, and there has been a declaration of war upon all of us, and I'm going to break that down a bit. We're going to discuss that with our guest, John, out of Ireland as well. But I'm going to read this to you. This is up on stopthecrime.net, and this is an insert that was in our utility bill, keeping in mind utilities are all operated by Rothschild. And we're going to talk about this declaration of war. I'm going to read it to all of you right now. And they're using fire as the intentional war all over the world. So here's what we're being told. Reality of year-round fire season is a new normal facing California state leaders. Now, when you hear me read California, understand this is global. This is not just California. So Southern California Edison, which is a utility down in Southern California, they say continues to be at the table as ongoing measures and new technology help reduce the risk of wildfires. A summer hike in the Los Angeles National Forest just 10 years ago would have been among a dense canopy of dark green trees. Today, that same visit will likely include brown, dead, or dying trees, or swaths of emptiness because of the increasing number of wildfires due to factors that include climate change. California's wildfire season is now year-round, and many, including Governor Jerry Brown, are calling it the new normal. It's a statewide issue that will require statewide solutions and the development of new regulatory systems and legislative framework, and utilities, including Southern California Edison, are at the table as part of this ongoing solution. Now, I want to add this. The criminals are at the table for the solution. The criminals. So we continue with this reading of the insert. Fire season is all year round and is now our new normal, said the Edison International President and CEO of Edison. And this Edison is part of the discussions working on solutions that will allow California to change the way we all think about and plan and respond to wildfires. We must be nimble and acknowledge that the current structure is unsustainable and a new approach is needed to mitigate risk, protect citizens, customers, and businesses, and to align public policy to current and future realities. I'm going to read that again. And you all need to understand we're going to be talking about policies here in this program this evening. Their intention to align public policy to current and future realities, keeping in mind these realities are being created by the use of weather weapons, but I shall continue. They go on to say, last year, California experienced a number of devastating wildfires, including many in Southern California. About a quarter, or 50,000 square miles of Edison's service territory in central, coastal, and Southern California is considered to be in areas of high fire risk. Southern California Edison continues to take steps to help reduce the risk of wildfires, including an aggressive vegetation management program and robust construction standards. Now, I want to repeat this. Robust construction standards. We'll discuss this in a bit. We also partner with local agencies. Yes, you bet they do. They partner with local agencies in efforts to evaluate various technologies to help with fire safety throughout Southern California. Some of these technologies include drones to help monitor high fire risk areas, weather stations in real-time, all-the-time cameras to monitor areas with higher risk for wildfires. When the National Weather Service declares red flag warnings, part of Southern California's Edison's response will include not necessarily to automatically power down the system, but they will re-energizing the power lines, and they'll go offline in high fire risk areas during fires. Those lines are not re-energized until they are fully inspected. Now, I want to add a couple of things here. They say this must be a sharing of the increasing risk of climate change impacts across society. I'm going to reread this. There must be a sharing of the increasing risk of climate change impacts across society. They go on to tell us how their fire management team works closely with local fire agencies during wildfires and coordinates response plans. The utility also partners with funds and nonprofits that work on various fire mitigation efforts, such as, they say, conservation corps. Now, it's very important, they say, that we will continue to partner on solutions that will make California more resilient against the impacts of natural disasters and climate change, said the CEO of Edison. We support state leaders as they seek to solve the statewide problem and respond to California's new normal. Now, I'm going to just let everyone know there's quite a bit of litigation against Pacific Gas and Electric for their participation in, apparently, as we're being told, and we know that's not the reason entirely, but of not removing brush and foliage from their power lines during that October 2017 fire that still to date is the nation's largest loss of property in the history here in Sonoma County. But right now, the lawmakers in Sacramento here are looking at new liability regulations and a new assessment and definition of liability, because they're saying, basically, how can the utilities be held responsible for a new climate change and new normals? They can't be held responsible. That it is not going to be their responsibilities. They say, lawmakers ponder liability. The new normal is no longer a new normal. It's called normal. They say never have they seen such volatile conditions across the state. And they say they suspect an arsonist. We have an arsonist. It is called Rothschild. It is called all the minions of the Rothschild dynasty as well as Rockefeller. It is all of the agencies that have conspired against each and every single one of us through the climate action plans. I have searched every country that has been reporting fires now over the last few weeks. Greece, Finland, Russia, other countries as well, and I have found they have all agreed upon climate action plans. Keep in mind now, they have activated the climate. All cities, all counties, all countries, all nations have agreed to this peril that is now being foisted on us, because climate change is due to the intentional large-scale manipulation of the Earth's climate, weather weapons. And we have to keep in mind that climate action plans are based upon scientific fraud. We have to ask why. Not only to create massive new markets, but to restrict all human activities, in fact, all life on this planet, all life activities, and reduce all resource consumption, and to massively reduce populations worldwide. So I want everybody to look up your climate action plan. Type in an example of that search would sound like this. I'm here in Santa Rosa. So I would type in Santa Rosa, California, climate action plan and resilient plan. And I will find the acceptance of weather weapons as a reality to literally wage war upon all of us with weapons that we are presumably agreeing to because we're saying it's climate change. And right now, Redding, California, as we opened up this show, is in the process of literally evacuating the entire town. My heart is sick. And this is what is happening all over the planet with these fires. And with that, I want to bring on our friend John from Ireland, who's experiencing and witnessing fires there in Europe as well. And we want to have a discussion this evening about what we all face, because this is weather wars, this is arson, and it has been declared upon us, and each of our cities and every single town has approved and agreed to these plans. In other words, they've given their consent for this horrific assault upon all of our communities worldwide. So, John, I want to thank you for joining us this evening. I know that we have been emailing each other back and forth about the various fires that have certainly been erupting across the Atlantic where you are, and I've been filling you in on the fires that have been burning us down over here. So, John...
well, Deborah, thanks for inviting me, and I'm delighted to have another talk with you. I think to put all of this into perspective, I think we have to go back just a bit and remember that the Gulf Stream, the Northern Hemisphere's weather engine, was killed with the BP Macondo drill explosion in the Gulf of Mexico. The Gulf Stream is dead. Our weather is static. So consequently, what's happening here in Ireland, is raining now for the first time in 2 months. And Ireland is famous for being green. We used to say that you could have all 4 seasons in one day. That has changed completely. Everywhere, the fields are brown, the lawns are brown. And that, of course, leads into all kinds of complications. But the bottom line is that it's commodifying water. Water is being restricted. And without water, the cows will not be given enough water to give milk. The fields are not producing the proper normal amounts of food. And so if this continues, and there's no reason, according to the EU, there's no reason that it's going to stop anytime soon, food and water are becoming more and more scarce. Just because you can go to the supermarket today doesn't mean you'll be able to go in 2 weeks' time, or you'll be able to buy what you want because the prices will be so astronomical. So, the fires.
Yes, I want to add this right now because I came across this YouTube, this video, just a few days ago, and I'm going to recommend that everybody take a listen to this. It's entitled CNN Slammed by John Coleman, Coleman, over climate change fraud. Now, it's important to understand that John Coleman founded the Weather Channel. He was the original ABC Channel 7 weatherman, and he started the Weather Channel. And he recently died this year in January. But he has, you'll hear a discussion in CNN Slammed by John Coleman over climate change fraud. Understand what he is saying in this interview. I would urge everybody to watch it. Get it out far and wide, every direction you can. Post it everywhere, accompanying it with discussions like John and I are going to have this evening. So with that, John, continue, please.
Okay, well, that is helpful, but the bottom line is that between microwave radiation of the whole planet, the weaponization of microwaves, the ability with both private and government-sponsored satellites to inflict this microwave plague on humanity that is resulting in this situation of weather instability is man-made. And the fact that, well, to me, it's so obvious. For instance, Al Gore, a politician, a wealthy one at that, a politician was able to fund a film that got him a Nobel Prize. Not that he needed the money. An Inconvenient Truth from the Karolinska Institute in Stockholm is where the Nobel Prizes are awarded. Those prizes are sponsored, and the festivities are all sponsored by Ericsson. Ericsson first came to common usage when it produced cell phones initially. They moved on to the backhaul of cellular technology. But my point is that at the same time as Al Gore is winning the Nobel Prize touting climate change as an inconvenient truth, one of the first scientists in recent times, well, since the 1970s, Professor Ollie Johansson, they were trying to sack him. He is the first one to identify electromagnetic radiation from CRT, cathode ray tube computers that would injure pregnant women especially, and their fetuses and their babies. So from that point forward, he has been persecuted to the stage where he was finally forced out of his job last November. So while they're giving Al Gore a Nobel Prize for identifying a problem, the man who is identifying the cause of the problems is being sacked. And this has happened again and again and again. And I'll name a few other scientists as we go along. But this week...
I want to add this very quickly. Ollie Johansson was very helpful here in Northern California with sending letters to the California Public Utility Commission when we were trying to hold back the deployment of smart meters. Yeah. And I have had the opportunity to speak with him and email him a number of times.
Excellent.
And I know he had been working and will always work hard. But you're right, they've taken him out, just as they've taken many scientists out over the years.
Exactly. And further to that then, regarding the fires, Professor Johansson's in Sweden, and at the moment Sweden is on fire as well. And the inconvenient truth in Sweden is that forestry is one of its major industries. Now, I have a friend who lives, he had to move from Scotland because the radiation levels were rising, and he thought he would move to France. Things in France were so bad that he up sticks and went to Sweden, in rural Sweden. And now, I didn't hear from him today. We've been in nearly daily touch for the last week or so because he's quite concerned.
About the fires.
Because
absolutely,
his well, he has two wells on his land. One has gone dry. His neighbor's well, this is rural now, his neighbor's well has dried up, and they're using emergency water from the village. So, obviously, living in the midst of a forest, he's scared to death. And he went there specifically because it was relatively low microwave radiation and the climate was bearable. And now he's found himself in the middle of an inferno. So this is how personal it gets. And even those who are aware can get caught because there is no place to go. That's why I got involved in this whole thing, because I could see what was coming in the sense of when a mast was put facing my home, and I did my own research, and I found that this stuff is really dangerous, and it shouldn't be out in the airwaves. And we are in the middle. We're not at the beginning of this. We're in the middle of it.
Right. That's right.
And it's going to get worse, and most of the people on the planet are not even aware of what's happening.
Okay, I got a quick question here, because maybe I'm connecting dots that should or shouldn't be connected. I have no idea. But considering what they're putting in the chemtrails, and I don't know how many chemtrails they're putting over Ireland, but they're, there's aluminum in there, which is a metal. They're putting barium, strontium, which is also another. How are the frequencies interacting with those? Because those things are actually blanketing everything. I mean, they cover everything.
Yeah, first of all, Nick, the chemtrail, all the heavy metals are highly, highly combustible. And they have been spraying us for decades now. And all of the ground is substantially covered. And that's why we have millions and millions of trees dying all over the world, because the trees are not able to have the uptake of what limited water they get, because those heavy metals are going up into the fine roots, like a person would get clogged arteries, like filled with cholesterol, and get plugged up. So we have this highly combustible spraying over the entire planet. And now it's very easy to start fires. And they can also use directed energy weapons to start cars on fire. Cars now, of course, have catalytic converters, highly, highly suspect with pulling onto dry grass. They can start fires. You have to wonder why they created cars that would start fires when you pull on dry grass. So, but you answer that question from your perspective, John.
Okay. Well, there's also the human and living beings, animals, insects that absorb these chemicals.
That's
and
right.
These chemicals interact with the microwaves in a way that, in the first instance, lowers our immune systems. So it doesn't allow us to fight back infections and various diseases. So these are heavy metals. So they will interact, and, well, obviously, cancer then is a result, because the cells are energized by the cells containing these elements, these metals, heavy metals, are energized by the microwaves. So that propagates cancer, among other things, autism.
I want to add to what you've just said right now, because I pulled up a climate action plan. It is entitled Safeguarding California, Implementation Climate Action Plans, October of 2017. And in regards to the pest that you just spoke about, John, I wanted to read what it says in this. It says that climate change is expected to lead to geographical shifts in not only food production, but also impacts from pests and invasive species. One recommendation outlined in the Climate Action final report states that we should develop and adapt pest forecasting tools that account for the effects of climate change. They've initiated preliminary efforts to evaluate and understand pest and invasive species movement with climate change using internal pest detection databases.
Okay. Yeah, but what about the disappearance? It's not just the proliferation.
Well, they're killing off everything. That's right.
Well, it's the preservation of what's there. Already they're reporting in County Wexford of no insects. We've all heard the stories about the disappearing bees. One of my neighbors had several years ago had numerous hives, and he was bringing home 700 pounds of honey a year.
Now you're talking about in Ireland?
In Ireland, yeah.
Okay.
And 2 years later, he didn't have a bee and not a drop of honey.
Right. Well, I think what I was actually trying to figure out here is We already know what the chemtrails are doing, what's in it, whatever. But with the research and stuff that you have done, could they also be used like as an amplification method for the microwaves and all of that?
They are.
Yeah. Exactly, because if a cow is in the field, the cow is eating the grass that has been sprayed and absorbed these chemicals. The milk then and the beef are being fed to us as human beings. We're absorbing it, and all of these things, interact with electromagnetic radiation. So it's like a full circle downward spiral for living things. It's fairly straightforward.
And that's absolutely true. And what we're also, of course, seeing now with the takedown of the inability for animal life to live because it is dying, they're now creating a fake food system based on laboratory creations of fake meat now. They're doing gene splicing and creating fake meat, as well as a laboratory-created leafy green growing system.
Soylent Green.
Yes, and Soylent Green in the sense of Senomyx, Senomyx, which is aborted human fetal tissue that they've been using in the food supply for many years.
Nestle, in particular.
Yes.
Pepsi
so
as
everyone,
well.
You can type in to stopthecrime.net on the search engine Senomyx, Senomyx, and you will see a flyer that lists all of the foods, animal foods, beverages and drinks that contain Senomyx. It is in many, many foods, and you don't want to be eating it because it changes the neurological structure of your brain. It also amplifies anger in society, and it serves as a ritualistic ceremonial sacrifice for those that do ingest human parts and do blood sacrificing and childhood enslavement and blood sacrificing. In fact, John, I'm just reminded because Bohemian Grove has just concluded here in Northern California. And we literally were under days and days of private jets flying in and out of the Santa Rosa airport for all of these people to participate in many of the crimes that occur out at the Grove. And we know that there are many. But go ahead, because... yes.
I was leading to the point that we've had disappearance of insects in County Wexford, and now we're experiencing the disappearance of the smaller birds. Where I live across from a wood, and historically I've lived here 35 years. And wild canaries and robins and tits and all other, a whole host of small birds and wildlife. And in the last 3 weeks, I haven't seen a robin. All of it, when we feed the birds, all we have are crows, magpies, and the occasional seagull. And that's 12 miles inland, which is pretty far inland for a seagull to travel. So, first we have the reports of lost insects. Now we I'm experiencing, and I've spoken to others who've noticed the same thing, the disappearance of the smaller birds. I don't know if they've moved to safer ground or if they have died. But we're watching a slow, and it's incremental. It's a daily kind of thing where it doesn't dawn on you, and then you think, wait a minute, when was the last time I saw a robin? And then the significance of it hits you. No bees, no wild insects, no birds. It's a silent spring.
It is a silent weapon system, and I'm just going to let everyone know what happened in 2010, which is exactly what you're talking about and part of it. We're told in 2010 that Light Squared launched a satellite that delivered 4G wireless signals to 92% of the United States.
Yeah.
And they say that during the initial calibration period of the laser-like antenna, creatures with high magnetite for navigation that are highly sensitive to electromagnetic fields, such as fish, birds, and crabs, unexplainably died and by the thousands. Fish and crabs washed up on the shores in Florida, England, and Maryland. Birds fell from the sky in Italy, Arkansas, New Zealand, and among 20 other species.
Oh, here, they fall from the skies here.
Yeah, and they say among the 20 species with the highest concentration of magnetite are humans.
Yeah. So that just coincides with what we've just been talking about, how these heavy metals accumulate in the human body and make us more vulnerable to everything that's being thrown at us.
Absolutely.
So, and further to that, now we're going into 5G, and this is one that's being pushed by the UN. And the UN, I'm speechless because of what the UN is doing in promoting the use of electromagnetic radiation and microwaves, and they are doing it in the most systematic way of appealing to the marginalized, the poor, and saying, we can make you rich if you adapt to the new technology. So,
well, they've recently launched balloons to allow.
Oh, that's Google, yeah. Google balloons
over Kenya.
Yeah.
And
okay, now that's remember now that's getting closer to the Earth. We already have the satellites. We have HARP bouncing. Global warming, by the way. HARP is beaming up at the ionosphere to heat the ionosphere. Well, it seems to me common sense would say, if we have global warming, then the first thing you should do is turn off the heater.
Well, if there weren't a genocide plan to massively reduce the global population, common sense would be common sense. But because we know that the ultimate plan is massive reductions of populations globally, and they're aiming at the poor and the disadvantaged. Yeah. And what's so interesting in these policies, John, and I'm sure you read the very same things, they always talk about the need to be more equitable and all the...
well, exactly.
Yes.
They appeal to the lowest common denominator, that those of us, the middle class, should be willing to sacrifice to help others. Well, I've struggled with this ever since Fukushima, and now I'm struggling again with South Africa.
In what regard? The reduction of water or the absolute forced migration?
The paradigm shift from America.
Yes.
In the 1960s, and with Kennedy, it was to export our expertise and help these countries pull themselves up from what we have learned to make America the most successful country in history, with freedom and all of the things that go along with it.
That we thought we had, but we didn't even have that during the Kennedy administration.
No, but
we were bankrupt.
even that was the propaganda, and that was what we were led to believe.
That's what, yeah.
That has completely turned around, and now it's a parasitical relationship with the rest of the world.
Yeah. Upon the American people as well. So there's not anybody.
Of course.
Yeah, that's excluded from this extermination.
But before I leave Sweden and all of that, there were a couple of other bits from Sweden. This is one that just fits so tightly into the UN and the EU government getting involved where they really don't belong. This week, and it's in The Nation as well as my conversation with my friend, but this is in The Nation, nationmultimedia.com. French civil protection service soldiers, experts in firefighting, pose for a picture after arriving at Arlanda Airport in Sweden. What they've done is they are importing supposed experts to fight the fires in Sweden from other countries, completely overriding the national sovereignty and pulling in EU emergency workers. And these guys arrived on Monday. France has already sent 2 Canadair planes to Sweden after authorities asked for EU emergency help to fight the blazes, which have caused no fatalities so far. No fatalities, and yet they're pulling in experts from France. Italy has sent 2 firefighting aircraft, and Norway sent 8 helicopters. Germany and Poland also responded to the request for assistance. So,
well, I have to say that after the fires here in Northern California, October of 2017, there were troops in the streets with guns, with rifles, guarding the streets, and they were walking through the neighborhoods. When we were assisting some evacuations, there were boots on the ground in uniform with guns, and they were putting X's. I believe, as I recall, there were red X's on the front of the curbs in front of the homes where people had already vacated, so that anyone that was going to loot or maraud through the neighborhoods knew exactly what homes no one was occupying.
Yeah.
And we were watching that, and I filmed that. And we're seeing that now, as you were just discussing, happening. We're going to see the movement of the military coming in on all of these other burned out areas as well.
Yeah.
So continue. So
but my point is that the EU is consolidating its control.
Yes.
Further to that, if there is a website called Copernicus, and it is the EU predicting where the fire areas are. So what we're dealing with is they can start the fires, they can watch the areas that are vulnerable, and they can predict when and where. I'm looking at the moment, we have, of all places, completely surrounded by the sea, Denmark is highly vulnerable at the moment.
So they're showing you that on that website. Would you please spell the name of that website so all the listeners can see what you're looking at?
Okay. It's EFFIS.
EFF? EFFE? Frank?
Yes. Frank IS. JRC. EC. Europa. EU. Now there is an interesting link here. This is called the Copernicus Emergency Management Service.
Okay, so for the notes in this show, would you please forward that link to me, and I'll forward it on to Granada Forum so we can make certain that we get this right. So for everyone that's listening, we're going to have this in the show notes, Nick, right? Yes.
Okay.
So explain again. So now you're opening up this website, and you're seeing
there's a map.
There's a map.
And a dialog box, country boundaries, fire danger forecasts, who's making the forecast, whether it's Europe or Meteo France, and it gives you the day, and then you can ask for records last 30 days, last day. So, but my point is here, we have Spain, which is very vulnerable. When I was in Portugal last year, you could see the desertification of Portugal kind of like Southern California. And of course, North Africa is highly volatile. But Turkey and the Ukraine are very vulnerable at the moment as well. So we could expect large fires in any of those countries.
Well, we know that we're going to have all kinds of weather and fire disruptions because they're telling us that's what they're going to do.
Right.
And all these countries have agreed to policies agreeing to this is the process that's coming up on them. Yeah. And it's all based on fraud. So these countries have agreed and are allowing all these horrific realities to occur. Wouldn't you say
Deborah,
that?
It's much to your credit because you are one of the few voices on the planet who can see the big picture. When ordinary mortals walk out their door and they see smoke, they think of the fire and their thoughts don't go any further than that. 2 weeks ago, Saddleworth Moor outside of Birmingham in England caught fire. And now they're predicting the possibility of fires along the south coast of England. So this is something, you are right, that it is a global phenomenon, but it most certainly in the northern hemisphere, and it goes back to the absence of the Gulf Stream that used to bring the moisture, especially to the British Isles.
And the creation of droughts with the weapons, the space-based weapons that can be deployed and have been deployed. And then, of course, all the combustibility of the chemtrails. And then the ground ignitions using satellites. So we've got a plethora of weapons that are torching the countries, our land, our homes, our cities, our villages, and destroying lives. And this is real. This is happening, and it is a war. This is war.
What I find fascinating here is that the insurance companies refuse to wake up to the dangers.
The insurance companies are the bankers, and they're in business to make money. In fact, I will tell you right now, the experience here, now nearly a year after the fires, there's about 60% of the people that got totally burned out that do not have adequate coverage to rebuild.
Of course.
And now, John, after the fires, they are implementing new codes and city policies under the Resilient and Climate Action Plans. That's why I can't underscore enough for any of you that are listening and you are not familiar with the Climate Action Plans, you need to be. I have a lot of YouTubes up where I describe them. I am a ex-builder of third-generation home builder with my family. We've built decades and decades, and I read these plans, and they are diabolical. And I can say that they're cutting off resources to our homes, and they tell us that in the plans. These plans are genocidal plans, reduction of creating large markets out of a false reality of science, eliminating all resources from all of us. And right now, John, the plans are saying, and I'm going to be doing a separate show on this, but the plans are telling us that they're eliminating fossil fuel, which petroleum never came.
That's coming.
Yeah, and they say that, and they say by 2030, John, in the plans I'm reading.
I thought it was relevant when the Rockefellers sold Rockefeller Center.
Yes.
They are moving from the physical world to the world of microwaves.
Right, John. Let me ask you this though, because I've seen this happen in California quite a bit. Not so much where I am right now, but considering the fire situation that's happening in Ireland, has there been any part of Ireland where the insurance companies red zone where they absolutely will not insure people?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
The way the insurance companies work here is that they just charge increasingly higher premiums. So they don't refuse anyone, and they'll certainly take your money. And they works the same with automobiles.
Right.
I want to tell you what we're seeing here, John, now after the fires, and everyone that's listening, anyone that you know that is in a fire zone, which is many, many people throughout the world, understand they're moving in with activating resilient plans. And what we're seeing here in our neighborhoods now after the fires, in fact, I will be attending such a meeting next week, and it's diabolical.
But it coincides with the program of rural depopulation.
Well, it does, but
so
they're doing these community meetings now. Here's the premise of this meeting. I'm reading off of a flyer. It says they're going to have a forum to gather community input for county fire recovery framework. And they say that the workshops will include facilitated small group discussion sessions with residents and will be encouraged to share their ideas and visions for each of the 5 strategic areas. And they talk about community preparedness and infrastructure, new housing, natural resources, economy, and safety net services. So what they're doing is they're rolling through a consensus plan that has already been developed, creating the illusion that the citizens in our area can weigh in.
Excuse my cynicism.
Excuse
my cynicism, but this is more Delphi.
Well, it
trickery.
is absolutely Delphi, and that's what I'm pointing out to everyone that's listening. This is how all these policies are being facilitated. It's all through hired consultants that work for the United Nations and other large consortiums, and they bring in the illusion that you are meeting to vote on some policies that they haven't yet decided upon. The policies are already fully written out. And all they want is to basically test the waters, put this forward so that the people believe they can weigh in. Now, John, anybody that they invite, when they say they want to invite people to come in and talk about how Santa Rosa should be rebuilt, excuse me, people that are not familiar with building and housing are going to be weighing in on a discussion to reshape the burned out areas where people already own their homes that have been destroyed. So people need to put their thinking caps on and realize, as you just said, this is a Delphi, and read what Delphi means. Go and
why don't they? What happened to the federal relief to help people rebuild their homes? That's what I'm saying. It's
fallen short of being able to rebuild. That's what's happened to federal relief.
Well, how much? And then again, how much of that federal relief actually goes to federal relief? A lot of that gets burnt up in the bureaucracy as payments and fees and everything else to the bureaucrats. So none of that, hardly any of that money actually gets to where it's going. I've seen that happen with FEMA.
Well, it is going to the people, but it is going to redraw plans to architects, to infrastructure, rebuilding of foundations. We were over-excavated here after the fires by FEMA to eliminate the footings, and they claim the toxic dirt and so forth. Millions and millions and millions of tons of material were hauled out to our landfills. And now the people are up in arms because of the heavy cost to bring back the fill and recompact it, and they have to have this engineered for compaction purposes. And this is outside of their insurance coverage. And they're claiming that right now there are over 500 people that have launched letters of complaint as they would like to rebuild, but are finding what occurred during the fires and during, presumably, the help. Many people hired private contractors to remove their burned debris off their properties, and that would have been the route that everyone should have taken. And the city and county now are saying that they have egg on their face because they were really promoting FEMA to remove all of this material. And now they're finding that FEMA has over-excavated, and it's costing everybody hundreds of thousands of dollars more per lot. So I can only say that.
But they're putting the onus on the victim.
That's exactly right.
And it's a pattern that's being repeated over and over in many different areas.
Yes.
In Europe, the health issue, they are rolling back quietly benefits, and if you can't pay, you don't get the care. Where it used to be, people have spent their lives contributing their tax money to a national health service. And the people of Ireland were tricked, actually, by being told that if they accepted value-added tax, which is 22.
Now we're coming up on the top of the hour, John. So please, we'll pick this up on the other side of this break. Thank you, everybody. Stay here.
Hold tight, everybody. We'll be right back.
Hold on, we're right back. Hey, welcome back to the Granada Forum radio program, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to reunite you with Miss Deborah Tavares. Deborah, are you there?
Yes, thank you. Yes, we're talking to John in Ireland, but I just want to add this so that everybody's aware that is listening to the news and watching the newspapers. There is not a day that goes by in the newspapers where we're not hearing about climate change. And some headlines in some local papers that are out of the New York Times say these things. Heat is becoming deadly. Rising temperatures imperil health in India, especially for the poor and working class. And then they show a picture, and it says that these women arrive at an emergency ward at a hospital and they had symptoms of heat stroke. Then we see another article, again, out of the New York Times, saying battling future floods. And they're talking about the floodplain restoration is catching on amid predictions of wetter years. So what they're doing is they have groups that are now planting plants and grasses and shrubs in low-lying land to help retain water, as we know that there will be wetter years, and also to, of course, create a habitat for the birds and animals, which really are not existing. You heard us talk about that in the prior hour. So I want everybody just to be aware of the psyops that's occurring now. It's all about the effects of the intentional capability and large-scale manipulation of the weather. But prior to the break, we were talking about health care. And, John, I'd like you to jump back.
Okay, well, I just, that raises a couple of points. The point I was trying to make is that formerly, everyone who turned 70 in Ireland was qualified for health care. Didn't matter how much money you earned. Now they've put in limits, ceilings, and so if say if you're middle class and you have a very small pension, if that pension exceeds their limits, you no longer qualify for the health care. Now, in 2010, on the national broadcaster here, a reporter called Alvy Keneally said, 1 in 2 people are expected to get some form of cancer in this country by 2025, according to the Royal College of Physicians in Ireland. Now, that date has been moved forward to 2020. No mention.
So they're creating the cancers that are going to kill off these people, so they're reducing the health care so that the corporate structure...
Is this private insurance health care, or is this
government? This is public. This is public.
Public health care. Okay, so it's government health care.
It's the methodology behind insurance in total, actually, on everything, because it is a big business, and they are fomenting toxins that are killing us off, and they know that. So
the point of this is that the resources that have traditionally been there, as the Irish population ages, fewer people qualify for medical care, and yet 1 in 2 people are expected to get some form of cancer. Now, who's going to pay for that? If you can't pay for it, you're dead.
Well, that is the goal, is it not?
Well, there it is. There it is. You know, and people don't see it because here people don't want to admit, A, they don't have the money, and
Well, I can tell you what
important.
we discovered, John, through Stanford University. They're now going to be deploying AI in hospital admission centers.
Yes.
And AI will assess the person's history. And AI, when you come in, dependent on the condition that you arrive in the emergency under, dependent on what your history shows, they may just go ahead and recommend you go immediately into palliative care or hospice care or death care.
Yep.
And why and how would they be able to do that? If they see a person that has gone uncontesting with the normal medical modality of all the vaccinations, of all the pharmaceutical drugs that have been administered, they know that those people that have made those decisions in a corrupt medical system that is formulated to extract money and create ill health, they will then determine that those people will not have access to continued life in hospitals. In fact, I was reading something, and maybe you heard about this too. It was in England, where there were hundreds of patients, elderly patients, that ended up being put into palliative care or care for terminating of life, and they went in for one went in for really literally a wound on their hand. And suddenly the records were showing that they died.
Yep.
Yeah, and this really does sound like a government globalist partnership sponsored healthcare system.
It is.
Well, I mean, and it's really been disastrous everywhere it's been tried across the world. I mean, they got Canada brags about its healthcare system, and yet they have people from Canada coming down to the United States to get treatment. And people in England, the media brags about what a great system that is.
So now, wait a minute, Nick. We're being told that the Canadians are coming down here for treatment, and that may be true. But our treatment within this healthcare system in the United States is a sick care management program.
Yes.
That's it.
Yeah, but
nothing. The word
what
health,
does that tell you about Canada's healthcare system?
Well, it's all corrupt. It's all intended to create and foment the very diseases that they are administering to us in the environment.
Believe me,
I think
I have to go through the VA system, and most of the time, their idea of treatment is to give you drugs.
Yes.
And not actually find out what the problem is. I mean, it took me forever to actually get diagnosed with what back injury that I had, and their idea of trying to fix the problem was, how can we get you hooked on opioids?
Absolutely. So John,
further to that, more even deeper and more serious, is the FDA's policy of having approved sources of human tissues. Now, Ireland.
No, we're talking about the FDA. Many people do call that, John, the Federal Death Association, just to be clear.
So Ireland is an approved source of human tissue.
So now, define that a little bit better. What do you mean Ireland is an approved source of human tissue?
If you look up the FDA and look up approved sources, you will find different locations. But Ireland in particular, historically, genetically, the way people die and what people die from, gives us a lot of, and indeed abortion now, which had to be partially driven by the need for stem cells. Mm-hmm. So these things can be collected, harvested, and shipped off to America very quietly by the medical establishment, and nothing is said. And recipients of whether it's organs or cells aren't going to ask, by and large, where this medical cure for them is coming from.
And doesn't that almost come in with the big history of Ireland being under the control of England? Because, I mean, England was the ones who tried to eradicate the Irish to begin with.
Okay, well, see, Ireland is a curious place. But Ireland is a republic, all right, but it's also a registered corporation, registered in Washington, D.C., just like Australia is.
Just like America is.
We're a corporation as well. We're traded on the New York Stock Exchange.
Yeah.
Right.
So as a corporation, the law of the land does not pertain. It's the law of the sea.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
I'm glad you're bringing this up.
Yeah. And it's really important because that is how we wind up with this elite that is dishing out all of this, because communications and the microwave radiation comes under the law of the sea. Now, talk about the law of the sea, by the way. An interesting fact is that much of this reverts back both to England and the Vatican.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when I was in
where does Israel fit into all of this? Do you know?
Well, yes and no. For instance, Israel, a company in Israel just called, where is it here? I took it up because I did want to mention it. Under the UN, Israel has as much to do with controlling the Middle East as it does anything else. I'm not denying the Holocaust for a moment, but it is an economic entity, and they are there to form a nation, of course, but also to control the eastern edge of the Mediterranean, the Levant, and the Arab world. Behind the scenes, Israel is working with the Arabs for Agenda 21.
And I'm understanding that Israel is working closely with China as well.
Yeah. So it's an economic entity to support big finance as much.
In other words,
else.
The bottom line, it's all worse than we thought.
Well, it doesn't get better.
They don't call them globalists for nothing.
Yeah, no. But the fact that Saudi Arabia is developing a new city called Neom, N-E-O-M.
Yes.
And
spell that again.
N-E-O-M.
Yes.
And it is connected. They're building a railroad up to Turkey. It's going to be a totally digital city. And
yes.
Another one, by the way, is being built in Mongolia, which is curious. So I don't know if this is post-war or before war. But the money is in place, and they're going ahead with it. And it's Israeli money with Arab money. No, here's a
well,
box.
Estonia is also an e-city right now. So this is what resilient cities are going to look like. They're going to operate on the backbone of 5G.
Okay. Yeah.
And everything is going to be smart. All the homes will be smart. Everything will be controlled and rationed.
What they did.
There won't be cars in these cities. Go ahead.
What they did in Estonia was that's where they announced the mandatory deployment of smart meters in Europe. Nobody covered it. The EU made the announcement. It was a non-democratic directive by the European Commission, which is not elected. They are appointed. And there's an example of the politics that goes on there. Barroso, the former, he was a Portuguese politician that wound up to be head of the EU. Where is he now? He represented Goldman Sachs as CEO at the Bilderbergs.
Mm-hmm.
So he's being rewarded for what he did at the EU, and now he's cashing in his chips. Mm-hmm. So this is how, and he was not elected to begin with.
Well, so
now we are faced with this deployment of smart meters mandated by the European Commission in a place that nobody knew about, nobody heard about, and wasn't covered in the media, and they have set a precedent. And that is the value of the Estonian experiment, because they are used to an authoritarian regime.
That's right.
And so they don't see any difference in getting their pension or their state funding via the cell phone, or because there's no banks. No banks.
Well,
necessary.
It's interesting. We have a friend that's actually from Estonia and is going there in a few weeks, and we've been talking to them about what Estonia really looks like, and of course we're going to be eager for their evaluation with boots on the ground. But they did show us their cards that give them access to everything that is required access for everything. In other words, you can't get on a bus in Estonia unless you have a card. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to necessarily pay to get on the bus, but you can't travel without an identity anywhere in Estonia. And I'm just now reading, too, that if you're in China and you want to go to a public beach, it's like making a reservation here in the United States for a campsite. You have to make a reservation in advance. You go through TSA-style radiation checks, and you have to have a passport. And this is to go to the beach.
Yep.
Well, they're doing that in the United States now. Because years ago they had this idea called the Real ID Act.
Yes.
And it got shot down.
Because a lot of people fought against it.
Yeah, people were against it. It got shot down in Congress numerous times, and it's still being
now let's just wait.
Because
let's stop a second here, Nick. Congress doesn't control or do anything. What they do is they gauge the acceptability of things they want to roll out. And if there is a substantial pushback, then they realize it's not the time. And they're like a turtle. They'll pull back in until the time is right.
They've moved this down to a state-by-state issue.
Yes, they have.
Instead of putting it on a federal issue and blowing it up in the headlines, because now all these states are now saying our IDs, our driver's licenses and our ID cards are now Real ID compliant. And I was like, for years, I was under the impression that was a dead issue, but now California and the airlines and the federal government saying if your ID is not Real ID compliant, you will not be allowed to fly on domestic flights.
Now, I can tell you in California, you need to have a passport, and you can bypass the Real ID requirement. But just before we get back to John, I want to throw something out because I think this is extremely important. They are eliminating cars, all vehicles, because they're moving us into electric vehicles. Why they have required all new construction in California to have solar adaptation by 2020 is they're having to shift the power grid. They're going to require everyone have an electric vehicle, and this is planned to occur by 2030. This is not far away. And in all the reconstruction here in Northern California after the burns, people are being incentivized to not implement natural gas in their homes. Now, on stopthecrime.net, we have a tab. It says, Kiss Your Gas Goodbye. And we have been monitoring and watching this in the Climate Action Plan for years. They say that everything will have electricity. So let me repeat. They're going into full electrification. That means your cars are no longer going to have gas. In fact, you mentioned earlier how Rockefeller had pulled out. Well, Rockefeller now is pulled out of and is starting to withdraw from the fossil fuel industry, and they're going into green technology. Now, Rockefeller obviously will never be caught telling the biggest lie, and the reason they became so wealthy is the deception behind where petroleum comes from. It's a renewable, and Rockefeller lied to everyone. It never came from dead dinosaurs or fossil fuels.
Well, and to underscore that, look at what Ford is doing. Ford has announced that it's going to stop making saloon cars. They may make one small car, and they didn't specify. But for a company like Ford, the pioneer in the automotive industry, to announce that they're going to stop making cars, they're going to focus on transport vehicles and things like that. I think that underscores exactly what you're saying about Rockefeller withdrawing from oil, Ford withdrawing from cars, and consequently we have people who will be herded into cities where they won't need them.
Well, in the Deagle.com document that talks about the planned reduction of population in various countries, and everybody needs to take a look at this, I did an interview with Dr. Bill Deagle, not the Deagle.com website Deagle, and everybody needs to hear this, and you need to, and I would recommend that you look at the charts and the maps. And the name of that YouTube is 5G Network, a global network for culling of mankind. And in that YouTube, that's again 5G Network.
And monitoring while they're culling.
Absolutely. That's why they want the computer vision cameras. That's why they want to see the effects of the diabolical events that they're putting up on us. Here in Northern California, we were told they're going to deploy over 20 cameras that have a vision of 150 miles and will monitor in real time, all the time, and also with night vision. They're watching the effects of their demise. And you see Davis here in Central California, one of the universities, has asked for all women that were pregnant here during the fires to please report the health of their babies. They want to monitor these people. They say they want to study the effects of the fires. They know the fires are killing us. They know that the smoke and all the toxic debris and fine particulate is killing us. They just want to know how rapidly it is doing to us what they intend it to do. That's what these studies are all about, because I think it doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand when you burn over 8,000 homes that contain paint, pesticides, all kinds of cleaners, just name it, cars, everything, that you're going to have poisons in the environment for years and years and years to come. And so this is all part of it. But what I wanted to say about the cars, here you have to get your car smogged if they tell you you must before you can renew your vehicle registration. And they now have new equipment that they're just putting in place in California where cars that are older than 1999 pay more money to get smogged. And now many of the smog locations are no longer providing smog certifications for cars older than 1999. And interestingly enough, on the back of the smog registration form, the very second thing on the back, it tells everybody if you're going to retire your vehicle. It says vehicle retirement, and that you may be eligible for $1,000 to $1,500 to retire your vehicle from operation. They are retiring the vehicles, and it's interesting because we've heard that other countries are buying them, buying the American cars. Because Russia, for example, as well as Saudi Arabia and many other countries, know that petroleum does not come from dead dinosaurs. And so we've got, in some instances, some well-made cars that other countries will use because they're not being...
Here they're exporting Toyotas. But there's a system here and in Britain. Here it's called the NCT, National Car Testing Program. And the most common reason cars do not pass this test. You put it on your windscreen, just like you do a sticker in America. You have a tax disc to say that you paid the county. You to drive on the road. You have your insurance disc to prove that the car is insured, and you have a third small piece of paper that says that your car has passed the NCT. The NCT, the most common way to fail it is for emissions, greenhouse.
Yes.
And
Right.
then if you can't, if the car doesn't pass, it's retired and you lose.
That's
And
exactly right.
you-
And that's
yeah.
what's happening now. So here in the United States, they're transitioning us. This is an absolute massive disruption. Imagine all the people that are going to get stuck with paperweights. Their cars will be worth less.
Yeah.
And they're saying
Well,
that
they're worth nothing. Believe me, I've got one in California that won't pass smog. It's a 1999. It will not pass smog. There is no way to make it pass smog. It's too old. The engine, isn't what it was when it was first built, and that's what they're relying on to get rid of a lot of these cars.
Well, that's
Exactly.
exactly
And-
true.
There's
and
no way to
then-
you can't even tune it up to make it pass smog.
Right.
We'll hear a lot. There's a chemical called diptane that they use, especially in diesel cars, because diesels are being phased out sooner than gasoline cars. But the point of it is, who suffers in that? The poor.
Yes.
Yet
absolutely.
again. So the UN is promising girls in Afghanistan equality and a better life if they learn coding in school. If they learn computer coding in school. The UN is promoting that. From my perspective, I'd say feed them. Make sure that they're safe.
Well,
Forget
of course,
this
that would
coding
be a human-loving perspective, but we're not talking about encouragement of advancement.
But that's why I'm saying
for
how
our
ridiculous
well-being.
the UN's involvement is. And what I was getting to, you asked about Israel, though. Here's an Israeli company. How Brightbox and Autonomo will use big data to advance connected cars. With real-time and historical automotive data, what kind of data are we talking about here, folks? These services help drivers to get their destinations faster and avoid accidents. More than that, vehicle owners will be provided personalized services from in-vehicle delivery of merchandise to on-demand fueling to road usage tax payments. The central repository of data opens the door to new uses for the information and provides more opportunities to help consumers and even save lives, says Alex Dimchenko. Now, that's an Israeli company. Now, further to that, I think it would be amusing if it wasn't so absolutely serious. There was a farmer down in Cork. And
They're in Ireland.
In Ireland. County Cork is the southernmost county, and southeastern. Anyway, he was driving home one night, and he thought he'd stop into his neighbor's farm and say hello. And so they had, as they say here, a few gargles. That's a few drinks. And he got in his car to go home, and he drove into a ditch. And the airbags deployed, and he said, "I'll hump it. I'll walk the rest of the way home and get the car tomorrow." So at 3:00 in the morning, there was a knock on the door, and it was the police. The man was arrested in his own home after the policeman asked him, "Was that your car?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, the seatbelt's deployed. We received a call from Germany that the airbags had deployed." And so he arrested him for drunk driving. No victims, no witness.
Well, that's interesting that you should say that, because there is a company here in San Francisco called Zen Drive, Zendrive. Now, this was originally promoted by the group that is promoting bicycles. In fact, they've snarled up traffic in San Francisco for years, proclaiming, I think it was a day a month, where they wanted to take over the streets and get the cars off the road. And the backer of that particular organization is now behind Zen Drive. And it is the exact situation where there will be an app in the car that will alert people in advance of any medications that you've taken that are disabling your ability to drive. And it will report on you. And it will also be able to report if you're on your cell phone, because they're certainly saying that now people with cell phones during driving of cars are unsafe. So the whole idea is to create safety for all of us by getting out of our cars so that we don't kill ourselves in our cars, because they want to bring in autonomous vehicles. Of course it is. But I want to say this. In Portland, Oregon, they have an initiative to bring in autonomous vehicles, and they're wanting to bring that in quickly. And that's why all of a sudden now many people are reporting that they are increasing tolls on the roads, and that's to get people out of the cars. And even within the streets, within their own communities, if you drive out your driveway, there are now tolls on the connecting streets, so that if you just want to go to the neighborhood corner market, you're likely to be paying a toll, all ways in which to get us out of the cars. And what's really, really frightening, here after the fires, John, they just had a meeting 2 days ago where they talk about the area that burned out on the hill above the Hilton Hotel called Fountain Grove in Santa Rosa.
Yes.
Thousands of high-end homes. They had a meeting where they're going to interconnect that entire area that never had walking trails or bike trails to the city. Now what they're saying is that they're going to create bike and foot trails for the interconnectivity in all cities, because they're moving us out of our cars. The only way
that whole area is designated a UN new city area anyway.
Yeah, but they've been doing that in Los Angeles too. I've already seen them do that, where they've taken some of the busiest streets in the San Fernando Valley, downtown Los Angeles, and other places where they've actually taken a lane away from car traffic and designated that as a bike lane where cars cannot travel.
They call that street
that's standard here. That's
street
standard.
calming.
Oh, they do that in Ireland too?
Of course.
It's a global. These are global plans.
Yes.
So for everyone that is listening, you need to understand these are global plans, and all of you need to know your plans. Go and type in your country, your city, your town, whatever, followed by climate action plans and or resilient plans, and read them. Or go to stopthecrime.net. We have a climate action plan tab. We also have many YouTubes. You can just type in Deborah Tavares, climate action plan. I'm on YouTube many years now talking about these plans. It seems now finally people are starting to catch up, because suddenly they're finding the atrocities emerging from these plans now being implemented with heavy weather assaults, and now the assaults upon our very communities. And I know you have more to say, John, and I'm looking, we've got about a half hour left.
Yeah.
And I wanted you to quickly get to some of the high points.
The most amusing thing in all of this arrived today, and I couldn't believe it. This is a website that says the potential dangers of Wi-Fi, the silent killer, and how to eliminate them with a Class 1 medical device. Were you ever worried about the dangers your family, especially your children, are exposed to when using a mobile phone, tablet, or other devices that emit electrosmog? The good news is you do no longer need to worry. What kinds of negative effects can mobile and other devices have on an organism? It goes on, nervousness, depression, blah, blah. They've invented an app or an innovative chip called BioZen with an extraordinary technology which is very simple to use and can be applied on all electrically powered devices and protects you against electrosmog. So you can put it on your phone. It shows magnetic field gradients, and it soothes the peaks in the stimulation of natural electromagnetic field and causes no reaction by our organism. So scientists I know, and Dimitris Panagopoulos, he's a doctor in biology, and I've known him for quite a while. Every time he seems to write a paper, he gets blocked, and he was being sacked, or he was relegated to an office after doing a study the size of a toilet cubicle without a window and just a desk. And this is a man with his doctorate writing scientific papers because he wrote a paper critical of electromagnetic radiation. So I defended him, and his boss threatened to sue me. And so we came to the agreement that if I don't mention his name, he wouldn't sue. So
I guess you're getting
so now
sued
you sent
now.
this to him to ask him to vet this. Is that what you did?
Well, I reported it from the perspective of a journalist covering a story, and he didn't get back anyway. But I, from the perspective of Dr. Panagopoulos.
Who did he work for? Hold on, who did he work for? Did he work for a university or a company?
He's an academic. So
okay.
He worked for universities. But his response was this. This, of course, is nonsense, but also, just like shielding the houses or the clothes, one way for some people to get money and pay the experts while at the same time keep industry satisfied by making people think they can live close to antenna towers once they've shielded their houses. I heard a guy, and he named him, whom I know, who was an engineer and tried to dispute our polarization paper without asking us first to explain whatever he could not understand. As I explained in my lecture, he was at a lecture in Horsham in England last month. As I explained in my lecture, by shielding houses and clothes, one isolates the terrestrial and atmospheric EMFs, which are absolutely vital for all animals. And of course, there's no device to put in the handsets to protect from their radiation. Once you change or attenuate the mobile phone signal, it won't be able to communicate and will emit even stronger radiation.
So I thought searching for a signal. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. But I thought that was very interesting. We have a supposed device that's going to protect you from your cell phone, and using it, of course.
Well, I thought I thought the assessment he made of that was to just quail the concerns that people have, to put them to sleep with the idea that industry is looking out for them.
Yeah, of course.
By no means is that the case. And just the name BioZen immediately.
Well, that's what tripped my when you mentioned Zen. I thought, I've got to get this one out. Now,
so for everyone that's listening, do not buy the BioZen. Bottom line, it's another way in which to create the lethargy, the idea that government is looking for ways to help you, when in fact that's not the case, and it's just another way in which to asset strip you while they continue to make you ill.
Professor Johansson says, unless they can provide you the pure scientific background for the device, don't bother.
That's right, because I know lots of people, John, that are putting odds and ends, EMF little things on their phones, saying that this is reducing the frequencies. We know that doesn't. What we do know that helps to reduce frequencies is to, number one, of course, not use a cell phone, But if you are inclined to have a cell phone, you can wrap it up in Mylar. It's a camping material. Mm-hmm. And you wrap it up enough to where you call your cell phone and there is no signal. It will not ring. And so if those of you that really are interested in that, I would suggest that. Another very interesting YouTube that I want to point out right now, and John, you're going to probably want to look at this too. I may have sent it over, but for everybody, type in this. This is the name of the YouTube. Snowflake, one word, Snowflake, Arizona, where the residents are allergic to life. And let me explain. It's a small community in Snowflake, Arizona, and these people have retreated into the desert to escape modern frequencies and the assaults of chemicals, of multiple chemicals. And these people are extremely sensitive and are certainly the ones in the canary in the coal mine that are getting the illnesses. And what's important, again, is it's to keep in mind back in 2002, what we found out in the Freiberger appeal was that more than 3,000 physicians and health practitioners in Europe signed the Freiberger appeal, which makes the connection between wireless technologies and the sudden explosion of widespread immune dysfunction, such as headaches, lack of concentration, joint pains, sleep disruptions, diabetes, heart diseases, and neurological disorders. So we're all of us,
which coincide from the chemtrailing and the microwaves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And for everyone that's listening, go to stopthecrime.net, download the symptom page on the top of the home page. Keep that with you in your car or in anywhere where you can understand the types of ailments that you're going to get, because you will get them. And your doctors are not equipped to identify consequences of frequencies or other toxins, or certainly what's happening with the chemtrails. Now with all the toxins in the smoke of the fires that are being ignited all over the world. So it's really important. So again, this YouTube is very interesting. People ask for solutions. So Snowflake, Arizona, where the residents are allergic to life, is an interesting YouTube for people to watch. There are people, as you mentioned, your friend.
The name Snowflake is derisory, of course.
Of course.
Well, of course, in the desert for sure. But you had mentioned your friend had moved to
Sweden,
France, and then moved to Sweden.
Yeah, from the frying pan into the fire.
Yeah, and literally as such. Yes. Absolutely.
Well, here's again me maybe connecting a couple of dots. That just kind of popped into my head right now, because we had talked earlier about the chemtrails and what they're putting in that, and how the electromagnetic frequencies might use that to amplify it. But it's not a might. It's a definite. Yeah. Okay, it's a definite then. But one of the other things that that we got to deal with is the addition of fluoride into the water. Sodium fluoride, sodium monofluorophosphate. All that fluoride derivatives that they're adding in the water, and they tell us it's good for our teeth. When essentially it's not.
Well, that's what they were serving up the prisoners.
But here's the thing, because sodium fluoride is a byproduct of aluminum manufacturing, which again is a metal, one of the nanoparticles that they're spraying in the chemtrails.
Okay.
And it deposits in your brain, and there's been this increase in Alzheimer's and all of that. Now, add that with the chemtrails and with the electromagnetic frequencies, the ELFs, and all this other stuff that's going down. This is not just a singular little mode of attack that they're doing. This is like coming at everybody from so many.
Well, I have some insight in. I have some out.
Okay, so
I have some insight into this. First of all, guess who was the corporate advisor to Alcoa Aluminium?
Now I know you're going to tell us.
Edward Bernays.
Oh, okay. Of course.
Okay, Bernays was Freud's nephew. Freud was with the Tavistock Institute in the UK. Now, Bernays,
which became the Rand Corporation here in Brookings as well. But go ahead.
Well. Anyway, Bernays, he was dispatched to America. He was an advisor with Ivy Lee to the tobacco industry in the early 1900s. He took 6 beautiful women and dressed them in the height of fashion, and had their photos taken on Fifth Avenue in New York for the newspapers with cigarettes. And they were, because of the suffragette movement, they were called torches of freedom. Mm-hmm. So that's Edward Bernays. Edward Bernays advised Alcoa Aluminium as well as the electricity industry. He felt his finest work was for the electricity industry. So they have known how to use, the title of Bernays' book was Propaganda. So they have known for 100 years how to manipulate us.
Absolutely.
And of course, the microwave industry is an extension of electricity. Now, which we don't have time, but I want to just address this business with 5G because the EU, through the International Telecommunications Union, which sounds like it's a workers' organization and is anything but, it's a subsidiary of the UN, and they sponsored what they call the Global Symposium for Regulators 2018, and one of the major speakers was Ms. Jane Stankiewicz, Global Executive Director of Communication Policy for Intel Corp. Now, even Intel, at one time, the chairman was Mr. Paul Otellini. He appeared in a video walking through an electromagnetic field, just like one sheet of lightning going from one pole to the other. And he says, we will make it safe, just give us the time. Well, it's been 20 years now, and they still haven't made it safe. And now we have Jane Stankiewicz talking to a UN-sponsored group saying this: 5G is coming more quickly than we think. The timeline for realizing these advantages will depend on how each country prioritizes 5G development. To that end, the discussions at GSR around what is coming up in 5G, how to enable it, and what needs to be done in the future are important, she says. Those are the conversations that need to happen so that regulators and industry can figure out a way forward. As part of these efforts, Stankiewicz says, Intel will continue to engage in dialogue around possible policies and position itself at the core of the 5G revolution. So, there we have UN-sponsored discussion with regulators from different countries about the deployment of 5G, not the control of it, not the proper use of it, but the rollout of it.
Well, it is a weapon, and it's interesting because there's a report. It's actually the report that was behind the interview I did with Barry Trower with the YouTube that's up called Cooking of Humanity.
Yeah.
And it is the report to the President of the United States entitled Realizing the Full Potential of Government-Held Spectrum to Spur Economic Growth. Now, I'm just, you were looking at that too, and you sent back an interesting page 5 in that report where it talks about examples of allocated spectrum uses and federal spectrum use in the value range. And it shows satellites and fires. It shows aeronautics and radio aviation, Department of Defense missile detection surveillance radar, land mobile radio, and it shows a car being connected. It shows maritime mobile satellite and radio navigation, maritime animal tracking, and it shows a tail of an animal diving, and so they're tracking everything. And Forest Service communication for law enforcement and wildfires, and meteorological aids, and it shows one of the ways in which they're using blimps and so forth for a dispersion of wireless. And then it says this in here, and this is I found very interesting. It says, ultimately, all countries will have to make the shift to a new architecture because no country has enough spectrum available to meet the exponential increase in demand that comes from the onslaught of these billions and billions of connected intelligent devices, sensors, and internet systems and services. In technology sectors, the first movers capture the bulk of the lifetime profits, and those profits fund the development of continuing leadership. The United States is at a crossroads in spectrum. Changes in technologies and policies are inevitable. In 2012, the year is critical. The nation must start to change course now to reap the full economic benefits of the federal spectrum. So this is all about money, profits, and certainly the idea of health is not even possible because
it's not mentioned. It's not mentioned, Deborah. And
well,
furthermore,
not only is it not mentioned, it's illegal to discuss health issue when you want to discuss anything against a cell site.
And well, if you consider the fact that that document was prepared for the President of the United States, those documents come into being because the President's office requests them, and then they scarper around to find the experts who will compose this and put their name to it. So and then the President says, I have this expert report, and he gives it to the Congress, and they act on it. It was a setup from the word go. We're presented with a document that says that this is necessary because it's so valuable, and that's not it at all. It's they have decided that it's valuable to them, and therefore we have to find a mechanism to convince the people. And if it's the President, of course, he's promoting this document prepared by these experts, well, then we must go with it. It's a typical propaganda.
And that's the thing that really drives me nuts more than anything else is how willing people are to go along with something just because their government or the president, regardless of who it is, says that I have a study. Those are probably some of the most evil words I've ever heard. I have a study, or there's been a study that says.
Well, the sad reality is what you alluded to a bit ago, Nick, and also you as well, John. It's the fluoride issue. And, of course, all the other poisons and toxins that have incapacitated most people.
Ireland was probably the first country to be completely fluoridated.
Well, in effect, people are sedated, absolutely sedated. People literally have lobotomies because people can't think. And it is amazing to me that we don't have more awareness faster, but we don't because of the increased flour and sugar in our diet, which causes a brain fog and obesity. We're dying. Many people are confronted with all kinds of assaults on their body and they can't think. But getting back to this particular document, those experts behind the study, of course, are given recognition, such as MIT and Harvard.
And Yale.
Yep, all of those. And so they're espousing the very organizations that are writing genocidal policies that could, sadly, many of the new technologies could have been used for good, but they got sold to the highest bidder. And people that had good intentions of bringing free energy and other aspects of healing technology to the forefront for the people have been eliminated, murdered in many instances.
That issue was addressed as far back as 1954 with Martin, a well-known philosopher before the world fell in love with Foucault, Martin Heidegger, in his book, A Question Concerning Technology. Mm-hmm. And he says the threat to man does not come in the first instance from the potentially lethal machines and apparatus of technology. The actual threat has been already effected in man in his essence. The rule of enframing threatens man with the possibility that it could be denied to him to enter into more original revealing and hence to experience the call of a more primal truth. So that was in 1954. So here we are 63 years later, and he is proving prophetic, not just philosophical.
John, I hope that everybody that has been listening to this conversation of reaching out across the United States to you in Europe and in Ireland, and your explorations and what you discovered there with policies and hearing what the policies are in the United States, understand that the hour is here. People must engage, absolutely must. And without engaging, you're guilty of the fomenting of the decimation of all living things on this planet.
Yep.
I know no other way to say it, John.
You're either part of the problem or you're part of the solutions. A real 1960s paradigm. But it's true, because they're saying the Internet of Things is going to change the way we live, the way we work, and the way we do business. It's going to change absolutely everything, and everything is going to be connected. Our freedom is gone, our privacy is gone, and we're being irradiated while they're doing it. Someone has to wake up.
Well, that's true. And, there will be those that will survive this in the first round of elimination, because the rounds of elimination have been occurring now for a long time. People have been dying by the roadside of this diabolical political takedown because we have rogue governments. We are all run by massive corporations where, and I found this to be very interesting, Supreme Court Justice John Paul Stevens said this, and this is really right on. This came out of a dissenting opinion that corporations have no conscience, no beliefs, no feelings, no thoughts, no desires. John, thank you. Thank you for joining us all the way from Ireland. We'll have you back again. Right. Everybody, please go to stopthecrime.net and get this YouTube. It will be up soon.
Yep. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Thanks, Deborah. Thanks, John, for coming over and at your late hour in the morning. And we'll see you next week, everybody.
Yeah. Thank you, John. Thank you, Deborah. God bless.